Welcome to Old New Borrowed Blue, the Blue Room podcast that looks at the things we love about this thing of ours called Everton. Each episode, I speak to an Evertonian about their favourite former player, current player they'd have loved to see in at the Toffees, and their favourite Evertonian or thing about Everton. Old New Borrowed Blue. This week, I am pleased to be joined by a colossus of UK comedy, founder of Hattrick Productions and lifelong Toffee, Jimmy Mulville. Jimmy, how is it going?
All right, Les. Thank you. Yeah, no, good. All good. I was up in Liverpool recently because I'm part of a committee that the council set up of people who are either was born in Liverpool, affiliated with Liverpool, to come up with some ideas of how to make the city even better. So it's pretty exciting, talking about the development alongside the North Dock. With our new stadium, the new stadium's thrown a gauntlet down. Really, it's thrown a gauntlet down to developers and the council to say, right, okay, so we've got this fantastic world-class stadium. In fact, the guy who is the chairman of the board, Patrick Nolan, is a lovely bloke. He's a lifelong Red, but despite that, he's a lovely bloke. And he said he thinks it's the best stadium in the country. He went to see a game the other day and he said, it's extraordinary, he said. And the way they've cleverly got that bank, they call it the South End. Do you not agree? They're going to have to find a name for it, which we all love, because the South End is not a great name.
Yeah, it feels like that ship sailed already to me, because we're already just talking in even the North Stand or the West or the South.
Man, can't we call it something else? Can't we? I mean, call it Gladys Street. I don't give a shit. I mean, you think, well, but what's great about it is they've angled it at such an angle. It's a steep angle that the sound, that when I went to the Brighton game, the sound that came off it, my son and I kind of jumped. It was just extraordinary.
Yeah, that was the thing that surprised me most about it, because when the ground was getting built, I remember Dan Mice was saying at the time, so you've got stadiums like the Emirates where it's got quite a shallow sort of curvature seats, which doesn't trap the atmosphere in, and that was one of the things he wants to do. And I think he's absolutely nailed the brief there, because against Brighton and against Palace, it was so loud.
Yeah,
it was incredible.
It's very exciting. I mean, we love Goodison, but actually the new stadium makes you not miss Goodison, because, and what I realised was that we're all there. All the fans are there. The songs there, Z-Cars tunes there, the same banter. We just moved home, but we're in our home. It feels like a home.
Yeah, it does. And that's another thing that surprised me as well, how quickly we sort of settled in. I think we're still kind of a little bit in awe of it, or I am at least. And I think every game feels like its own event at the minute. So I'm not yet into that sort of, can't be arsed going today kind of thing. And hopefully I won't ever slip back into that routine. But yeah, it's so nice. It's just dead exciting. It's nice to have something to cling on to and be excited.
And isn't it great the way they've painted that pub blue and white, the Bramley Moor?
Yeah. There's a couple of nice new pubs popping up and down along that road as well. So like you say as well, it's going to be great for the city when
it's going to, honestly,
projects and buildings come in.
I think so. I think the next 5 years you're going to see that whole area is going to regenerate. I mean, it happened with the Emirates. I mean, the Emirates, they plonked it in East Manchester, and it's the whole area has changed dramatically. Just think, jobs. People going there, spending a bit of money, just life being there. It's just great for the city, I think. Great.
Yeah. I went to the Emirates for the first Everton game when Kale scored and got sent off for his goal celebration. I remember at the time there was nothing there at all. It was just a ground and not much else. But now, like you say, it's really built up that area. And what the good thing about this is it will really extend town. So it's where we've gone from just sort of the city centre, from Matthew Street to Bold Street. You've now got it out to the Baltic. You'll have it out that way. So town just becomes a much bigger proposition, doesn't it?
And I've seen some plans that they have in the pipeline with pretty serious property company, and that whole area between where town ends and the stadium is, there's that little gap. It's called the King Edward's Triangle. I mean, if their plans go ahead, it'll be such a fantastic area of, houses, hotels, cafes, walkways, pedestrian areas, and leading all the way up to the stadium. It will be just magnificent, and it will look great from the water as well. Just extend that magnificent. It'll be the liver birds, that kind of heritage skyline merging into a brand new kind of mini Manhattan. It's so exciting.
It'll be staggering, yeah. And so I live over in Birkenhead, so my beloved
You.
town will be even better. So
Yeah,
there we go.
no, I think Liverpool is a city that reinvents itself and innovates, and this stadium feels like it's part of that. It's like a big statement saying, you know, we're here now. We're in the 21st century, and we're looking ahead.
Yeah, definitely. Right, let's look back then instead of looking ahead for this for the rest of the podcast. You've just released a book.
I have.
There's going to be a show.
Yeah.
Everton and Me, A Complicated Love Story. I've just finished reading it, and it from the title you think, yeah, we've all got a complicated love story with Everton, but it goes deeper than that. It's about a complicated love story with Everton, with your family, with the city of Liverpool. Which I think, you know, being in showbiz yourself, I think there's a lot of Scousers who escape the city. Really, I know a lot of bands have done that. A lot of musicians have escaped the city and, you know, gone to London because they feel they've got to get out of that bubble. When reading it, I absolutely loved it. Such an easy read. I flew through it.
Thank you.
It felt very cathartic, though. You sort of laid your soul bare in parts of it, and was it very cathartic to write it? Is that why you did it?
It's a really good question, Les, because when Ian Ridley, who I've known for many years, is a very eminent sports writer. He's a consultant with a publisher, and he came up with this idea of reaching out to certain people and saying, do you want to write a memoir about your relationship with your football team? And a mate of mine, Andy Hamilton, who's a very funny writer, great writer. He wrote things like Drop the Donkey, Outnumbered, and he's a very funny comedian in his own right. And he wrote a book last year about his relationship with Chelsea called Blue Was the Colour, How I Fell Out of Love with My Football Club. So they are books about very personal. Your relationship with Everton will be different to mine. It'll be similar in many ways, and there'll be differences. It's deeply, deeply personal. And so it occurred to me that it wasn't just about football. So I decided that, you know, if there's one constant theme in my life, it's my love of Everton Football Club. But like anything, any long-term relationship, it goes in and out of good and bad times. And I thought it's not worth me just recounting the games that I went to and saying whether we won or lost. I needed to tell people how much I loved Everton and how much I needed it at certain times to reconnect me in a way that I didn't feel that vulnerable. I could go to a football game with my uncle and my stepfather, and we just talk about the match. What they didn't know, at the same time, I was soaking up family. I was getting in touch with my family, and I was feeling more part of my old community because, you know, I always explain to people that there's a guy I was working with, and he's from London, and his dad's a cab driver, and we were talking about him going out for lunch with this guy that he needed to get to know, and he said, "Oh, I don't like all that bullshit, that networking bullshit. It's all middle class bullshit." And I said, "You know what? I get it." I said, "But it's about making connections." And I said, "You're not betraying your roots by doing this stuff. Any tree wants to grow away from the roots and go as far as it can up into the sky and then blossom into fantastic leaves and flowers. It never loses touch with its roots. But what tree wants to stay with its roots? You need to grow from your roots." And I lost the plot in the 80s, and I kind of tried to sever my roots, and it had disastrous consequences for me. And I'm very grateful that some people intervened in my life, just came across the path like kind of angels and just said, "Have you thought about doing this?" And I took their advice, which is unusual for me because I hate advice. But certain people in my life, like Bill Kenwright and a therapist I was seeing in the 1990s, and I just thought, you know what, I'm going to take a risk here and go back to Liverpool. And I went back, and now I'm back, as you say, I'm up and down all the time, and I'm returning to the place where I started. But I'm seeing it with fresh eyes. I'm different. It's different. But I feel like it's the right thing to do. I feel like I'm home when I go.
Yeah, it's nice to have those little serendipitous moments, isn't it, that can completely change the course of things. It's kind of, I mean, the match is a microcosm of that, really, isn't it? So you've sort of got your routine, you go to the game, you don't know who you're going to bump into.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can see people you've not seen for years, bump into them, have a nice little chat. It's always more comfortable because it's the context of the game. You don't need to do the small talk of like, what you've been up to the last 15 years. You can just talk about the game.
It is a limit. It's quite an intense, limited intimacy, isn't it? It's like just those 90 minutes, 2 hours you're at the game. And I say this in the book that on the last game of the season on May the 18th, which is my dad's birthday, which was so kind of weird because he was the first person who took me to Goodison in 1959, that long ago, when goalkeepers wore flat caps like Peaky Blinders. to keep the sun out. They didn't have fancy American baseball caps. And on that final day, we sponsored. I managed to manipulate the club into letting me sponsor the game. So my company sponsored the game, and I took all my family, my 3 sons, my uncle Jared, who's 88, my dad's younger brother, my stepbrother, who's a Red, but we didn't shout about that. But his dad, my stepfather, was an Everton fan. That happens sometimes, doesn't it? Where the father and the son, because the dad is on shift work, he gets taken to his first match by a member of the opposing team. And sitting behind me, my seats were just behind where the sponsors sit. And so I could see the people that I'd sat next to for 30 years. I wasn't in my seats.
Oh, right, okay.
But I could see them. They were just behind me. And I thought, I'm never going to see them again. 30 years, I've been sitting next to them. We've had this limited intimacy where we've hugged each other when we've scored. We've booed together. We've moaned about things. We've cried. We've done all these things, and now it's over. And then on the first game of the season, when I went to see them, I think it may have been the friendly against Roma, or maybe Brighton, I can't remember now. I walk in, I've got these tickets in a posh lounge, the Moor Lounge. I go in with my uncle, who, by the way, is hating every minute. He doesn't like change. He doesn't. Right. Why have you left Goodison? He doesn't like the food. The food shit. He said, "Where's the soup? Where's the steak and chips? What is this? Mackerel?" And but there on the next table to me is the family I sat next to for 30 years, and both of us thought we'd never see each other again, and fate just put us together, and we jumped into each other's arms and hugged each other like we just survived the Titanic or something. It was a great moment. You realize these are the things about football that you don't get on Match of the Day, is that it's part of your history and part of your life, and it's part of who you are. Really, it's part of your identity. It's another way of being part of a community, and being part of something bigger than yourself, as we all know, is good for your mental health. So it was a fantastic moment where Debbie and Larry and our 2 adult boys were all there, and we looked at each other and thought, we said, it's a bit weird, isn't it, this being in the new stadium, but it's nice. And so we kept an open mind, and like I said to you before, that because we're all there, because the fans are there, and because the Z-Cars themes are there, and it's the same people, a home is the people, not the building. And so Goodison was our home. I loved it, but I'm so pleased to be in the Hill Dickinson.
Yeah, I'm the same as well. And just on the music as well, you say in the book that the Reds always spoil everything, and for you, they kind of spoiled the Beatles a bit. I like to think we've got a bit of revenge when we've spoiled There She Goes for them by adopting that as our song. It's not much, but I'll take it any time.
No, you got to go for the small victories.
Oh, exactly. That's what it's all about. So before we get into your choices, I always like to ask what people's first game was. Maybe the first game you went to, or the first game you remember. Yours is one that you jot down in the book.
Yeah.
So if you just want to talk,
well, it's
a cracking story.
It wasn't the first game I went, because my father was obsessed with Everton, and like I say in the book, when he was away with the Royal Navy in Japan when they were fighting the Korean War in 1953 to 55, I was born in 55, about 9 months after he got back, and he wrote to my mother, and he wrote to her every day. He didn't see her for 2 years, and they've been married 10 weeks, and he was shipped off to Korea. He wrote to her every day. He sent her money every week because they were saving up for a house. And he said, June, my mum's name, June, I don't care where we live, as long as it's within the 10-minute walk of Goodison Park. Right? So he wasn't an entirely rational man, because he would take me to games before I could remember anything about them. And my mum would say, why? He said, because he'll become an Everton fan by osmosis. It'll just sink into him. I did exactly the same with my son, Jack, when he was 4. But the first game I actively remember, was in 63, in May 63, and Everton were on the verge of winning the league, the Division 1 it was called in those days, pre-Premier League, and we're playing Fulham. And now my dad was working shifts. He worked in Clarenstock Power Station as a boiler operator, and so I didn't go to games because there was no one to take me. I was 8 years of age, but I'd mind cars in the street, because our street was a 10-minute walk from the ground. So blokes would park their car and we'd do, can we mind your car, please, sir? And most guys would give us a shilling and stuff. And some guys wouldn't, and we'd we explained that there was a safety issue, that their car might get scratched or damaged if they didn't pay a shilling, because we would look after the car. We would make sure no scallywag would scratch this car. And they kind of got the message. It was my first entry into entrepreneurship stroke extortion racket. But I was so intent on seeing this game. It was the final game at Goodison, and if we won, we'd win the league. So I decided to. My grandfather was at home, but he didn't really. He was a Liverpool fan, and he was stuck in front of the racing. He come back from the pub, he put the racing on. My mum was at work. She worked at George Henry Lee's as a waitress. So I thought, you know what, I'm gonna nip up Walton Lane and see if I can bunk in. Now, as you know, at 3/4 time, they open the doors so people can come in and out. And no one was leaving that day. And I bunked in the Gladys Street end, and I stood, as you're looking out down towards the Stanley Park end, I was just on the left of the goal. And even though I was a kid on my own, I felt completely safe. Yeah. The main thing about the crowds in those days is we were all standing up on the terraces, and the posh people sat up in the stands. But even though it was crowded, sometimes you get 55, 60,000 people standing up, there was a kind of delicacy to it. If they saw a kid or if someone had fainted, they get put up on their hands and funneled down to the front of the pitch, and then they'd sit just on the other side of the wall, which I'm sure health and safety wouldn't allow today. But I was a kid on my own. People around me were great, and we were winning 3-1 against Fulham. And Fulham had a decent team in those days. Yeah. Had Bobby Robson, who was going to be the England manager. But we had a really good team. Alex Young, the Golden Vision, Roy Vernon, it was our captain, and he kind of played inside left. And then, so I was there about 15 minutes to go, and Alex Scott, nicknamed Chico, for no other reason than he had black curly hair and, could be Spanish. He wasn't Spanish, he was Scottish, but we called him Chico. And he belted down the right wing, and he had a kind of hunched run. It was a very deceptive run because it looked like he was going slowly, but he was going like shit up a shovel. Yeah. He went down the right, crossed it over, and Vernon, and like I say in the book, I can't quite remember whether he headed it or booted it in, but he completed 4-1 and completed his hat-trick. And we waited for the final results to come in. Tottenham got beat by City 1-0. We were in the clear, we'd won the league. And then I waited with the crowd, and the team went up into the stands where the director's box is, and were presented with the trophy. My memory is of Roy Vernon holding up the cup and thinking, this is the best place to be. I don't want to be anywhere else in the world. And I skedaddled home. No one knew. I didn't tell anybody. I told my dad later, and he was fine about it. And my mum was more anxious. She'd have had a bit of a fit that I was going there on my own. But that's one of those memories that just gets seared on your hard disk, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. It comes back to that feeling of family at the club, doesn't it? So even then, as an 8-year-old, strange men in hats, it would have been, I suppose.
We were all hugging each other.
Yeah,
everyone being picked up, and hats were people wearing caps, throwing. I just felt like Everton, we were going to be the team that dominated the 60s. How wrong was I?
It was such a weird decade, though, wasn't it? Because you had so many different champions, so many different cup winners. And I think just on that 63 team, it definitely gets overlooked because the 66 to 70 team. I don't think it gets enough recognition. So you talk about, players like Roy Vernon scoring a hat-trick on the final day of the season to win us the league. That doesn't really get spoken about. No. But we will dip into that 66 team now for your choice of old, which is your favourite former player. Fellas people of your vintage, men and women.
Yes.
This is generally the fella they say, so I love to talk about him. Your choice is?
Alan Ball.
Yes.
Alan Ball, every time. He lit me up. When he arrived, I was 11. When he left, I was 16. And he was one of the stars of the World Cup winning England team. He was the engine, really. He never stopped running. And he was totally committed on the pitch. He gave you 110%. There was no doubt about that. He'd get angry when things went wrong. He was passionate about, winning. And he was added to the team after the Charity Shield because, as you know, Les, being a student of Everton, we won the Cup in 66. Mm-hmm. And you talk about overlooked wins. That was a fantastic final, one of the greatest finals ever. Yeah. And because we live in a modern era where Sky have, bought the Premier League, it's like the first division didn't exist. So, you know, anything predating 1992 doesn't really seem to feature. But in 66, we were down 2-0, as you know, with 20 minutes to go, and we pulled back and we won 3-2. And it was a fantastic victory. It was good in many ways, not least of which because Liverpool had just won the league.
Yeah.
So it took the sting out of that. We won the cup, they won the league. The Charity Shield, as it was called in those days, not the Community Shield, was played at Goodison Park, was played at the FA Cup winners' place. And on the pitch that day, Ray Wilson, who's our left back, who played the England team, came out holding the FA Cup. Roger Hunt came out at the same time. He played inside right. These are all very old terms now, but inside right, number 8 for England and Liverpool. He came out holding the league championship trophy. And between them, they were holding the golden Jules Rimet World Cup. And they did a lap of honour. And the Beatles were number 1 with Eleanor Rigby. And again, I just thought, well, I'm in the epicenter of the universe. Yeah. There's no, where would you want to be on the planet now, apart from being here? And the only downside was that Liverpool won 1-0.
Yeah, it's a wonderful picture. That though, I've seen the picture of that. It's so good. And like you say, to be there at that moment in time, it must have just felt like the sense of the universe. Funnily enough, I do a show called Mailbag where we get like people just send us in random questions, and one of them was about time travel. I was like, if you could travel back to any moment in time? And mine was a very specific game. I think with Bank Holiday weekend, August 1966, Everton beat Liverpool 3-1, and Alan Ball scores 2. Yeah. Were you at that game?
Probably. I can't remember. Yeah. I mean, I used to go,
perfect though.
In those days, I'd go to every single game, and then I was like 11, 12. I go with my mates.
Yeah.
But you know, Ball, when he bought the white boots, I remember him coming onto the pitch in the white boots, and it kind of blew me away because everyone wore black boots.
Yeah.
And he had these white boots, which is a real statement. It pissed a lot of people off. You know, some people wrote about him in the press. What's all this white boot nonsense? But that was Alan Ball. You know, he had a kind of healthy belligerence, you know, because he was quite a short guy, 5'6", and so he had to battle his way into teams, I guess.
Yeah.
And it was sheer dedication, hard work. And that thing about proving people wrong is, I always say to my children, who are now in their 20s and one's in her 30s, is that there's no greater feeling than that feeling when you proved people wrong. And I think he was a kind of guy that was, you know, he wanted to, he was never satisfied. He's always trying to push people. So he became like the spirit of the team. Now,
yeah.
I think a lot's been made of that midfield, which was Howard Kendall, Colin Harvey and Alan Ball. And they were all different players and they melded together brilliantly. Colin Harvey was called the White Pele. Howard Kendall was a brilliant defensive midfielder and very creative as well. And there was Ball. Ball was the kind of star of the show and was a showman. So on one game, he was playing, I think it was West Ham, it was certainly Claret and Blue, maybe Aston Villa. And he went to chip the ball over the defence and they ran backwards very, very quickly to kind of anticipate. And as they ran back, he just stopped, put his hands on his hips and sat on the ball. And the crowd cheered like we're cheering a matador. And then they all got so pissed off. They ran at him. And as they ran at him, he chipped it over the defence. And you think, that's an entertainer. Yeah. That's someone who realises that, you know, football is at its heart. It's entertainment. We go there to be distracted from the woes of our week. And as you say, to live in that vicarious kind of 1.5 hour drama that just unfolds in front of us. We don't know what's going to happen. And people like that, I think, they kind of set things alight in a way. And when he left in 71, when he was sold in 71, I mean, I was completely, it was like when I heard the Beatles had broken up. It was and it was around the same time, actually.
Yeah, that was a bad few years, that wasn't it?
Yeah, it wasn't a great few years if you're an Everton fan or a Scouser. But and I do mention this in the book. Many, many years later, you know, working in television, I do a show called Have I Got News for You? And I was taken as a guest by the BBC to the World Cup in Germany. I think it was 2006, correct me on that. And it was the first game in our group stages. And we were taken backstage. and the controller of BBC One, Peter Fincham, he said, "Oh, do you want to come and see Gary and Alan?" I went backstage, and I knew Gary a bit. I said hello to Alan Shearer, and then at the end of the table, they were eating out. It was a lovely sunny day, eating outdoors with the outside broadcast vans from every country in the world. It was like Game of Thrones. It was like a kind of massive encampment of the different broadcasters from around the world, all having their lunch before the game. And I saw this character at the end of the table, who's now in his early 60s or late 50s. It was Alan Ball. And I kind of quickly said my hellos and goodbyes to Gary Lineker and Alan Shearer. And I went to, as I'm walking towards him, I realized I'm very nervous. And I say, in my business, I meet lots of people who are on telly and are famous. And to be honest with you, you become inoculated against it. They're not, it's just your work. It's what you do. So I'm not overawed by meeting someone off the telly or someone, famous, a celebrity. But here I was, back in my 11-year-old self, about to meet Alan Ball. And I walked up to him and stood in front of him. And unconsciously, I checked his feet. And I was thinking, is he wearing the white boots? But he wasn't. And I said, "Excuse me." I said, "My name's Jimmy Mulville. I'm a big Everton fan." He went, "Oh, all right." And he was kind of having a cup of tea or something. I said, "I was a huge fan of yours. You're my favorite player." And he was smiling, because these guys, they're used to this kind of interaction. I get it. But in those days, Alan Ball wouldn't have been stopped on the street. He kind of faded a bit into history. And I said to him, I said, "When they sold you in 1971, I said, it was December the 21st, 1971. I cried all Christmas and into the new year." And he put his cup of tea down. He said, "Yeah, so did I." He said, I didn't want to go to Arsenal. It wasn't a promotion in those days going from Everton to Arsenal. But Mr. Catterick, the manager, he came in, he called me into his room and he said, "We've done a deal with Arsenal. You're playing for Arsenal." And in those days, players, even celebrated players like Alan Ball, really weren't in control of their futures. It wasn't until the advent of the Premier League and the Bosman ruling in 1995, as you know, it released players from that kind of indenture, that kind of chattel relationship of owner and chattel, that they, after their contracts, they could go anywhere they liked. And certainly these days, players with their agents, I think the advent of agents has changed the dynamic. Players are much more in control of where they go and how long. We've seen it with Isak this year, is that he basically bludgeoned his way out of Newcastle because he didn't want to play for Newcastle. So in that moment, the player has more leverage than the club. But in those days with Alan Ball, you could see on his face, even many, many, many years later, that it was a memory that still gave him a little twinge of pain, that it was something that he didn't want to do. He had his best days at Everton. He started off on the crest of a wave, World Cup winner. He then went on, as you know, to win the league. We lost the FA Cup final to West Brom along the way in 1968. We didn't turn up for that day for some reason. But the 69-70 season was a brilliant season. Alan Ball is sold in 71, and the club does not win another trophy for 13 years.
He was still only about 26 as well, wasn't it, Sam? He was sort of mid-20s, definitely.
Yeah.
I feel that sort of, I think that's where the club maybe changed from that sort of Mersey millionaires of the 60s and one of the big spending clubs, although they did spend big in the 70s still. It feels like the dynamic of the club changed. And then I was doing a podcast yesterday with Gav Buckland, who's Everton's official statistician. And he said another pivotal moment was when we didn't sign Trevor Francis in 79. We sort of thought the outlay was too much on that one player. And it kind of feels like from Alan Ball, we never really recovered and got back to what we were in the 60s, save for a little blip in the 80s, which wasn't the same. It was that was a team that was sort of, it was built and there was no superstars in that team. That was one of the
big it was a great team, but there was no great, and there were great players in many ways, but there was no, as you say, there was no Alan Ball, there was no star of the show.
And the club changed quite a bit in that regard, which, though, speaking of superstars, seamless link there, moves us on to your new choice for this. So your favorite current player. Safe to say he's a superstar and he has surprised me, I've got to say. Who's your choice?
I'm going to choose Jack Grealish, which if you'd have said to me 6 months ago, would you like to see Jack Grealish at Everton? I said, I'm not sure, actually. I'm just not sure about him. And you know, the story, you know, the kind of feeling about him. But honestly, he's come to Everton and he's just a delight. You know, he's clearly enjoying it. He's enjoying. I think he, a bit like Paul Gascoigne, needs a lot of love.
Yeah.
And boy, are the Everton fans giving him that. And so I think it's a little bit of an ambitious move on our part, but I think it's great of us to get him on loan. And I'm hoping by the end of the season that, you know, he'll want to stay and we can stump up the money to buy him and he becomes a fixture. He's only 30. I think he's got another 3 or 4 years in him of you know, playing really at a high level. But more than that, he brings a spirit to the club, a risk-taking kind of cavalier showman. Like I talk about Alan Ball, he's a showman, he's an entertainer, and we all want that. We want him to see him beat a man, beat him again, get tripped up, get a foul. You know, he's just exciting. It's like when I used to when Rooney, when I first saw him, you know, burst onto the scene. Whenever he got the ball, there was an excitement. Yeah. You just thought, oh my God, what's going to happen now? And you kind of want players like that, and other players around them respond. I mean, to be honest with you, it was a close call between him and Ndie. Yeah. I can't pronounce his name. Was it Ndie? Ndie. Yeah. My son's always correcting me. It's Ndie, Dad. It's Ndie. He's brilliant. I mean, he is just brilliant. You know, scores the last goal at Goodison, first goal at the Hill Dickinson. Clearly, he loves he loves playing there. My feeling is that he may be on his way in summer. I don't know. I don't know how attached he is to the club. I couldn't tell you, but it strikes me that he's being mentioned now on Match of the Day. People will be sniffing around him. Yeah, I completely understand if he wanted to go and maybe play for City or play for, you know, a club where he just thinks they're at the next level now, a level that we're trying to get to, but may take us 5 years to get there. But he's fantastic as well. And having him and Grealish and Dewsbury Hall is not bad either. Yeah. And then you've got this young guy, Tyler Dibbling. Yeah. And then I quite like Martin Roll, who's just joined as well. Yeah. He looks pretty handy. So I'm beginning to see an Everton that I recognise from the past, which is, you know, tough but skillful and exciting around the box. And a bit rusty here and there, but nevertheless, I can see real progress. And Jack Grealish, more than just being a player, he's a statement of intent. Yeah. And Alan Ball was a statement of intent. We've got a World Cup winner in our team. Jack Grealish, we've got basically an international star player in our team, who was £100 million when City bought him. And he's now playing for Everton. And he's still that player. You know, he's still as good as that. So yeah, I think I've got to go with him really, and I know it's a bit kind of, I'm going for the obvious, but I think sometimes the obvious is the right choice.
I mean, they say never fall in love with a lone player, but it's too late, isn't it? We all already have done.
We love Jack Grealish. We love him.
Yeah, I think it's a good comparison. It's sort of he's come to Everton and he fits us. And we fit him as well, I think. So I think at City, and this is like a bit of a comparison with Wayne Rooney. Wayne Rooney was a more exciting player at Everton, I'd argue. When he went to United, he became part of a machine and he won the lot. Jack Grealish was similar, more of a maverick at Villa. Went to City, became part of a system, won the lot. And it feels like this move to Everton, suddenly he's Bertie Big Bollocks in that team, basically. Yeah. He's the lad who's won it all. He's the pin-up. He's got the skill. And it's freed him up, and you can see how much he enjoys it. And we love seeing players like that. We've not had any for a good while. Now we've got a few on the pitch at once. So yeah, it's a good statement of intent for the future, isn't it?
That's great. I'm genuinely excited about, you know, the next few years. Yeah.
Yeah, me 100%. Yeah, we'll move on to borrowed then. So this is a player you would have loved to have seen at Everton, and this guy would have made a big difference over the last 10 years. So your choice is
Harry Kane. Now, it's interesting, Les. Last night, I was telling my son, Jack, who's 21, he's been going to see Everton since he was 4 and is a mad blue, even though he lives around the corner from Stamford Bridge. But there was no way I was going to let any kid of mine become a Chelsea fan because I love them too much. Anyway, so, and I said Harry Kane, and he had an interesting reaction. He went, yeah, I can see why. He said, but I'm not sure. He said, I'd have liked to have seen Rooney. I said, well, I know you didn't see him because you were too young. I said, but I saw Rooney. He said, no, I mean Rooney when he was in full sail. and Paul Gascoigne when he was in foot, because we had Paul Gascoigne as well at the end of his career. So I thought that was interesting that he felt that they didn't really do their thing at Everton, and it wouldn't have been great for them to be. But I chose Harry Kane because what we've needed over the last 10 years, I'd say, is someone who can just stick the bloody ball in the back of the net. Because all the lead up is great, but we haven't quite got. I mean, Calvert-Lewin has come and, you know, he's kind of comes and goes, and he's gone now. But he had that brilliant kind of beginning to the season under Carlo Ancelotti, which he couldn't help but score, because you had James Rodriguez feeding out to the left, Luca Dean whipping it in early, and Calvert-Lewin put it in the back of the net. That was the formula, and it worked every bloody time for like 9-10 games. But then he gets injured, and I have to say I like the man that Beto is. I think he's an honest player. I think he cares. I think he wants to get it right. I see him wanting to get it right, and I feel for him. But at the moment, anyway, in his life cycle, he's not quite a Premier League striker, because his first touch, his decision making in that first second can be a little bit behind the game. And as you know, at that level, you're making decisions in a nanosecond, and that's the difference between scoring and not scoring. And I think with Barry, he seems like he's an unfinished article yet. I think that's work in progress.
Yeah,
I was intrigued to see what happened with Trinity. He was heralded as being the great thing from Portugal, and you know, it was going to be the next Ronaldo. That hasn't kind of worked out. It is interesting. I think these players go to clubs, and you know, obviously the manager's looking at them on the training pitch day in, day out, and they're not seeing something they expected to see, and so don't pick them. And of course, if you're not picked, then your confidence goes down, and strikers play on confidence, don't they? And Harry Kane seems to have never suffered from that kind of the vicissitudes of. He's always been quite solid, even when he's not playing well. He'll score a goal, and he's tearing it up over in the Bundesliga. You know, so. And I like him. I think he's a kind of, you know, he just gets on with it. He's not a flash Harry. I don't know whether you saw the play, the James Graham play about Gareth Southgate.
Oh no, I've not seen it.
Anyway, it's a brilliant play about the Southgate regime in England and about Kane, and when he missed the penalty against France.
Yeah,
there's a wonderful scene where Gareth Southgate, played by Joseph Fiennes, comes onto the stage, and there's Harry Kane with his head in his hands in the dressing room, having missed a penalty against France. Because I reckon we'd have beaten France because we were on top.
Yeah,
and I think missing the penalty kind of took the wind out of our sails. And what happened was, Gareth Southgate walks up to him, and Harry Kane says, "I'm sorry, boss." And Southgate said, "I'm not boss." And he always said, "Call me Gareth. Don't call me boss." He said, "I'm sorry, Gareth. You know, I let you down." He said, "No, you didn't. No, you didn't." He said, "I've often wondered why I took this job." He said, "But I can tell you now, I now know why, because I did what you did. I missed a vital penalty, and I can tell you, you're going to be all right." Such a moving moment between two. Now, whether that moment happened, I don't know, but it made me like Harry Kane even more, and Gareth Southgate, who I think is a pretty special man as well for many reasons. But no, I think if we'd had Harry Kane, Les, you know, in the last 10 years, I think we wouldn't have been circling the plug hole for the last 5.
No. But you see the difference. So we had Lukaku from 2013, I think, or 2014. We had Lukaku for a few years there, and you can see what a striker of that quality can do to, like, you know, to a team. Because when he left, we sort of, you know, we faded off pretty quickly. Harry Kane's definitely in the same mold, and the irony with him is, though, he's probably kept that Spurs team sort of up in the top half of the league for a long time, but didn't win a thing. As soon as he leaves, they go and win the Europa Conference. Then as soon as he goes to Bayern Munich, they don't win the Bundesliga for the first time in however long. Since then, though, he's won the Bundesliga there. He's won the German Super Cup. I was looking up some stats on him as well. He scored 100 goals for Bayern in all competitions, hitting the landmark faster than any player in Europe's top 5 leagues. So he's beat Messi, he's beat Ronaldo to that record. He scored 400 career goal against Borussia Dortmund last weekend, and he's broke the scoring record for England while representing the foreign club, and he scored 76 goals in 110 appearances, which is the all-time England record, I think. So it's sort of, he feels like one of those players who's very underappreciated because he's just sort of Harry Kane. I don't. He's not exciting, is he? He's not like.
No, he's quite.
He does his job really well.
And I mean this in a nice way. He's quite an ordinary man.
Yeah.
With an extraordinary ability. So he's not a Flash Harry. You know, he's not a Paul Gascoigne. He's not a David Beckham. He's not any of those people who kind of caught the front pages as well as the back pages. He's very much a kind of, I'm a footballer and I like playing football and I like scoring goals. And the rest of the time, I'm sure he's a family man and he just gets on with his life. But he's quite an old-fashioned player in that sense, actually, because that's the way players used to be. They were never on the telly, or they were never making records unless they, like Everton in whenever it was in 84, 85.
85, wasn't it?
Yeah. Sang that terrible song on the Wogan show. But anyway, and that was the thing in those days, with their bubble haircuts and singing out of tune. Andy Gray clearly miming, because I'm not sure. Andy Gray can do many things, but I'm not sure he can carry a tune. Maybe after a few pints he can.
Yeah, you never know. I think the best thing about that was getting the whole Wogan crowd there waving Everton scarves. Very, very surreal time. Right, we'll move on then. Finally to the blue section, which is your favourite thing about Everton, or your favourite Evertonian. Fair to say we've gone from Harry Kane, not a showman, to this guy, very much a showman. Yeah,
I've chosen as my kind of favourite Evertonian, if you like. I mean, I could choose my father, I could choose my uncle, I could choose all these people, but I think for the purposes of this podcast, I think I would like to choose Bill Kenwright. Now, it's a story, Bill. Bill's a story. Bill is, as you say, he was an actor. He became a very successful theatre producer. He came to all the games, and he got hold of me in 1992 when I was an actor. And he offered me a part in the play, which I didn't do I don't know, I forget now what the reason was. Maybe they changed their mind, I changed. But in the conversation, he said, "You're an Everton fan?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Did you go?" I said, "Well, actually, Bill, I watch them when they're in London." And he said, "Why don't you go to Goodison?" I said, "Oh, Bill, it's Saturday, it's so far." He said, "Hang on a minute, I go every home game. Meet me at Euston. We're playing at home this Saturday." So I turned up at Euston, 9:30. There's a guy there called John Collins who works for Bill in his theatre company, and he is the head of the Everton Away Supporters Club. Now, I don't know whether, because he was from the south, I don't know whether Bill made him do that because he was working for him so he could organise the trips, or whether he was an Evertonian before he worked for Bill. So I'd imagine being an Evertonian will sound good in the interview if Bill was interviewing you.
100%.
So he's a lovely bloke, John, and he's got these tickets. He's got a fan of tickets, and these are half-price tickets sitting in first class. They've done a deal with then Virgin, and Bill, surrounded by about 8 or 9 fans, go up on the train. We talk about football. He tells us stories about, behind the scenes, ones that he can tell about players and because he's been a fan for years. He's also been on the board for years, and he's on the board when Sir Philip Carter was chair. He's on the board when Peter Johnson, a Liverpool fan, owned us for a period. Do you remember that period?
Yeah.
And so I kind of broke the spell. I went to Goodison. I went to see my mum for a cup of tea, 10 minutes up the road to Goodison, watched the game, got back on the train with Bill. I was home within 12 hours. And I thought, well, it is easy. But even then, I didn't go back immediately. But Bill would invite me up every now and again. He kept working on me. And I'm very grateful to him, because in the end, in 95, the year we won the FA Cup, the following season, I decided to just jump in. I bought 3 season tickets, one for me, one for my uncle, my dad's younger brother. He was the only surviving member of that generation, and my stepfather. My dad died when I was 23. My mum remarried this lovely bloke who happened to be an Evertonian, which was great. So the 3 of us went from 95. We've been going for 30 years, and I have to thank Bill for that, really, because Bill basically, he kind of shamed me into it. I felt ashamed that I wasn't getting off my arse, and I was saying I was an Everton fan. But if you're a fan, it involves commitment, and it involves inconvenience. And it isn't just all, it's not a walk in the park. I heard this one saying, if you love a football club, said, well, and it's painful sometimes. And I was talking to this guy, and he said, well, there was a medieval mystic called Mungo. He was a monk or something. Mungo was this medieval philosopher, and he said, love is a bridge of hair over a chasm of fire. I thought, bloody hell. It's not a walk in the park. And it's a bit like that with Everton, is that, you know, if you love a team, then your emotions are kind of ravaged every up and down. And going with Bill, and then going with my family, members of my family, I think that was such a kind of game changer. Bill had a huge effect on me in that respect. And then what happened is I came in with lots of other people to help him buy the club in '98. I was a tiny investor. He had much bigger investors, but I just wanted to do it as an emotional support to Bill. I'm on your side. Let's buy it back from this Liverpool fan. Let's get it back on its feet. And he wore his heart in his sleeves. An Everton fan. He got David Moyes in, and David Moyes, I think, you know, working with what he had. And Bill didn't have a lot of money compared with the other clubs that were, you know, in the top. But we know we qualified for the Champions League one year. We got the FA Cup final. You know, we were having our small victories. We weren't filling up the trophy room, but there were moments where you thought the club is punching above its weight. And Bill spends his theatre business must have suffered, because as far as I could see, his whole obsession was with Everton. And his partner, Jenny Seagrove, who's a very well-known actor, she'd come up to the game, and they became part of the fabric of the club. Bill would talk to fans on the, you know, and he'd have to field some awkward questions sometimes when the fans said, what the bloody hell, isn't he picking this guy? He was fantastic. And then what happened, as you know, is he sells the club to Farhad Moshiri, and he tells everybody, I found you your billionaire you want. Because people have been banging on saying, we need a billionaire. We need someone who's going to spend a lot of money. I found your billionaire. He's an Iranian chartered accountant, and he's friendly with Usmanov, the Russian oligarch. So some alarm bells are going off in my mind. And then, of course, what happens is Usmanov gets sanctioned when Russia invades the Ukraine. And then the money seems to dry up. And, you know, Farhad Moshiri spent a lot of money, didn't he? But what, I mean, you probably know the stat. It's 750 million or something.
It was about that, yeah. It was
on players, but spent it unwisely. And what became apparent was Farhad Moshiri knew nothing at all about football, and so was getting advice from all sorts. And I think Bill, if I can be so bold to say, Bill made a mistake. When he sold to Moshiri, he should have stood back as chairman and let them get on with it, and his reputation would have been absolutely safe.
Yeah.
Because what happened was he took the job as chairman, so he was still the face of the club, but I'm not sure how much executive power he then wielded, because the ownership of the club was in different hands. And if you own something, you want to call the shots. So Bill's in this position where, had the club been doing well, it would have been great. But the club began to do worse and worse. And as you know, though, I mean, blimey, I mean, when Moyes came in, I really thought this year we might go down. And boy, did he pull us out the doo-doo. I mean, he did brilliantly winning all those games back to back. But what happened was, as the club spiraled and began to kind of circle the plug hole season after season after season. I mean, that great win against Crystal Palace, I couldn't go to. I was attending a charity dinner in the city, and my son went. He was at college in Liverpool, and I saw him after the game. He said, Dad, it was the greatest game I'd ever seen. And I thought, isn't that a shame? My son thinks the greatest game is the game where we won.
Yeah.
But it was a great game. I mean, if you're a club like that, winning that is winning. That's winning the FA Cup final. That's your cup final. So Bill, I could see Bill was frustrated. I went to the Fulham game at the Craven Cottage, and he kind of intimated in so many words that, you know, things weren't great, and that Farhad Moshiri was being badly advised, and, you know, he was kind of a bit of a headless chicken, poor old Farhad. I don't know Farhad Moshiri. I'm sure he's a decent man, but the truth is that he was lost, and it's a cutthroat game. And there are plenty of people. If you've got 750 million quid, there are plenty of people who come in and relieve you of that money. And he turned 750 million quid into basically a terrible squad. And then what happened was the fans began to kick off bad, you know, a lot of banter. There were stories of a player being threatened. There were stories of a member of the board being threatened. I think Denise Baxendale, who was our CEO, again, very nice person, hardworking, committed person. But the team's not playing well on the pitch. That's all the fans care about. They don't care how well the hospitality is or how well run Everton in the community is. It's basically, if it's going well on the pitch, everybody's happy. It's not going well on the pitch, they turn on the board as is their right to shout at the board. But it got turned into a different narrative, as it was no longer safe for the board to turn up to the club. And I'm not sure whether that was true or whether that was the spin of Fahad Mashiri because he didn't want to go. And listen to fans listen, Liverpool fans, when I say Liverpool fans, fans from Liverpool, Everton fans and Liverpool fans, they'll shout at you and they'll kill you with their words. But I don't think they're going to physically attack you.
No, it sort of appeared in a vacuum, that didn't it? There was so much unrest, and then there was, like you say, there was so many stories going around, and you just don't know where these stories came from, whether they're true. I doubt that was true, the Denise Barrett Baxendale one. I just can't see it. But I think that did a lot of damage to the fans, and I think, like you say, with Farhad Mashiri, Bill Kenwright was a lightning rod at that point for everything that was going wrong. He was the lightning rod because Mashiri was never there for a start.
Exactly. And we knew Bill. And I think there was an element of, well, what are you going to do about it, Bill? But Bill's the reality of the situation is Bill couldn't do anything apart from advise. But advice can be ignored. And I think that, I feel for Bill. I feel for Jenny Seagrove as well, because what happened was he absented himself from the club he absolutely loved and spent many, many years working all through the night on doing deals, transfer deals. And of course, he was great at attracting players because he was from show business and he could treat players well. Peter Johnson, who was it? Who was the goalkeeper we tried to sign?
Oh, Nigel Martin. Took him to Birkenhead. Yeah.
Who was it?
Nigel Martin.
Nigel Martin.
Yeah.
And he took him to Birkenhead and showed him around his food delivery unit. And then Nigel Martin said, "Thank you very much," and signed for Leeds. So Bill was great as a front of house man, but he also was totally committed. And his idea, of course, was the stadium.
Yeah.
And it was the twinkle in his eye. And of course, then he then managed to kickstart it through the Mashiri money, which is a good thing. Mashiri he wasn't all bad. No one's all bad. And but never saw it come to light. He died in 23, so he didn't see it happen. I'm sitting there on the first game, thinking about Bill and thinking he'd have loved to have been here.
Yeah.
And I just hope that the club or the council can see their way to acknowledging that in some way. Maybe a bit later on, just calling a lounge the Kenwright Lounge or the Kenwright Stand, or the council call it Kenwright Way, going up there, because there was a man who literally didn't have to do what he did. He had a very successful business. And because of his commitment, he was a Liverpool-born guy who was completely obsessed with his football club and gave everything to it. And I think that in honor of his memory and also for the good he did, I'd like to see the club recognise that in some way. But I don't know whether I can understand why the Friedkin Group want to move on from the past. I absolutely get that. And I think they're great, actually. I think they're doing a great job. I think they are sensible, serious sports business operators, probably a bit like Fenway over at Liverpool.
Yeah, I think we can look back on the sort of the Bill Kenwright years a bit more objectively now, and especially now we've been through that last sort of 5 years, which have been, the 90s was always the yardstick for things being shit, wasn't it? Basically, it was like, oh my God, it'd be like Mike Walker all over again. Yeah. I think these last 5 years have probably surpassed that. So I think we can look back at the state the club was in when he took over from Peter Johnson, that relative period of stability, which there was a bit of gnashing of teeth at that, because it was like, well, we should be able to kick on, we should be able to win stuff, but we were finishing fifth. Now it's totally different. Now we were finishing fifth when you had the top four, you had the top six. We finished eighth. Now gets you into Europe. We finished 12th. We've always just not been able to make that. But I think that period of stability gave us, like you said before, it's about moments, isn't it? It's about memories and stuff as well. There's a finite amount of trophies and a finite amount of clubs who win them. I think out of those years, we got a lot of good memories because we saw some really good teams, and it was a nice period of stability there. Do you know what? We'd kill for that now, wouldn't we?
Yeah. Well, I'm optimistic. I think maybe that I'll take, for the first season back in the new stadium, I'll take just in the top half. Being realistic, I'll just take that and just glide into the Easter thinking, oh, fine, we can breathe, and then you can plan on. I'm actually also happy to admit that I'm wrong about Moyes. I kind of thought, oh, really? He's good, but actually, I think he's got the bit between his teeth.
Yeah, he
And
seems a
there's
different
a
fellow
man
now,
who's
doesn't
been journey, hasn't he? He's been on a real journey, David
he?
Moyes.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I was the same. I was a little bit skeptical. Well, I was a lot skeptical, really, because it felt like that classic Everton going back to what you know kind
Yeah,
of thing. But he was definitely the best person and the best person available at the time. And
yeah. And
he'll
it's a
do
bit
well.
like when we went back with Howard Kendall, of course, those two times it got increasingly worse. But I
Yeah,
think Moyes, to be honest, he's been around the block now, and he got turned over by United, and look how well they've done since they got rid of him.
yeah,
But he wasn't even given a season, and I always think that, to prove people, like I say, proving people wrong. I wonder if he's got in his unconscious somewhere where if he can do something splashy at Everton and establish a system and a culture at Everton that is a winning culture in the next 2 or 3 years, or it seems to be that way. If he can lay the foundation of that, it'll prove something to him that he is a great manager, because he did things with Everton which were way, way above our expectations. That's why Alex Ferguson spotted him.
yeah,
He's a fellow Scot, I know that, but he saw something in Moyes that was in Alex Ferguson. And Alex Ferguson got 3 years. And as you know, Alex Ferguson nearly left United. And then at the 11th hour, they won the FA Cup. And that turned things around for Alex Ferguson. He then won eight premierships in 10 years. So
yeah,
had Moyes, I mean, we'll never know, but Moyes was given 11 months at United. But because he wasn't that was the days when big star managers it was like a revolving door, wasn't it? Mourinho and Van
yeah,
Gaal, and they all did badly at United because
yeah,
there's something wrong with the club. And you can see that now is that Amorim, I think, is a decent manager. And thank God they by the way, I was a United fan on Sunday.
It was funny, that, wasn't it?
It was funny. I said to a friend of mine, I wish that Jurgen Klopp, the German manager, was still, because I could say, if only there was a word for the feeling I have at Liverpool's misfortune.
If only. I'm sure there is somewhere. I just can't think what language it's in. Jimmy, that's been great to talk to you.
That's a
Really,
pleasure.
really enjoyed that. Brilliant choices as
I
well.
always enjoy talking about Everton with an Evertonian.
Yeah, it's good stuff, isn't it? Do you want to just tell everyone, name your book, where you can get it, anything else?
Yes, you can get it on Amazon or in bookshops. It's called There's Gonna Be a Show, and it was out on Tuesday, and it's a very, very short book. You'll read it in one sitting.
Yeah, it's a very, very easy to read book. And you've got a podcast as well?
Oh, yeah, I do a podcast with my mate Peter Fincham, who's not a football fan, but because we both work in TV for 40 years, it's called Insiders, the TV podcast where we lift the lid on television, tell you what's really going on.
Yeah, brilliant. Love the sound of that. Right, Jimmy, thanks for your time. Really appreciate that. That's been this latest Old New Borrowed Blue. We'll be back at some time with another one. Up the Toffees.